In a time when it seems like every single movie is a Marvel movie, The Batman has been near the top of my most anticipated movies list since way back in 2019 when it was first announced that Matt Reeves and Robert Pattinson were teaming up to bring this version of The Dark Knight to the big screen. Now, this is definitely not your mom's Batman. This is definitely not a Batman movie for everyone. Like, this is definitely not going to be some people's Batman. It's extremely dark and committed to a consistent, broody tone that may or may not be your cup of tea. Now, for me, well, we'll get into it. So, full spoilers ahead. If you haven't seen it, drop a like and come back later because we're gonna dig into everything from the brilliant filmmaking to some of the more questionable, maybe controversial decisions that were made in this newest take on a classic hero. Let's do it. Now, the two reasons why I was most excited to finally see this movie were Matt Reeves and Robert Pattinson. And in my opinion, they both delivered in spades. Matt Reeves has been a favorite filmmaker of mine ever since I saw his take on the Planet of the Apes franchise, which is still one of the most underrated film trilogies of all time. If you haven't seen it, run, go check it out. It's amazing. Because the life and freshness that Matt Reeves was able to breathe into a decades-old franchise has always amazed me. Because large blockbusters are super easy to get lost in between the giant, spectacular set pieces and the crazy action sequences, but Matt Reeves in all of his movies always has a way of keeping everything centered on the character, and The Batman is no different. This isn't a movie about the villain. This isn't a movie about large earth-shattering threats or team-ups. This is a movie that centers on Batman, solving a mystery as the world's greatest detective, which is something that we've gotten hints to in other Batman movies, but we've never dug into it like Matt Reeves and Robert Pattinson do here. This really does feel like a modern noir film. And amazingly enough, Matt Reeves has gone on record saying that the studio really did let him make the movie that he wanted to make, and it shows throughout the entire film. And that's pretty rare nowadays in an industry that seems to have heavier and heavier involvement from studio executives. I mean, it is a business after all, and if they don't think that the movie is going to sell, they're not going to let you make it. Now, this movie really does push the boundaries of a PG-13 rating as it follows the Batman as he hunts down the Riddler, who in this interpretation is basically the Zodiac Killer, which is very, very far from the Jim Carrey version we've seen in years past. Also in years past, we've seen Batman's origin before, and this film just blazes past that as Reeves trusts us as the audience to put together the pieces as we jump into the deep end as Bruce Wayne has already been Batman for 2 years, and he's still trying to figure out who he is and what he's doing. To be totally honest, I've really enjoyed every iteration of Bruce Wayne. There's always something to appreciate. For example, in the Dark Knight trilogy by Christopher Nolan, I really enjoyed Christian Bale's interpretation of the character. It was almost like he was playing 3 different characters. Bruce Wayne when he was alone with Alfred, Bruce Wayne when he was a billionaire playboy putting on a show, and Batman. And I've loved many of the other interpretations of Bruce Wayne and Batman as well. But that being said, Pattinson might be my favorite version of Batman yet because he's bringing all the broody aspects that we saw from Ben Affleck's angry version of the character, and he's turning that dial up to 11. This Bruce Wayne doesn't really care about his appearances, what other people think of him. He's just committed to his cause. And committed, if I had to choose one word to describe this movie, is the word that I would use: committed. It's absolutely committed to its almost emo, grungy 90s dark vibe that it's just got pulsing throughout the entire film's veins. Now, let's talk about one of the things that I love the most about this movie: the visuals. The VFX were absolutely mind-blowing. There wasn't a single shot that pulled me out of the movie. Usually in a VFX-heavy film, there's going to be at least 1 or 2 shots where they just didn't quite stick the landing, whether it's just because it's a very hard visual effect to pull off, maybe they didn't have budget, maybe they didn't have time. For whatever reason, most movies of this scale have a few shots here and there that I let them slide, but they do, for just a brief instant, pull me out of the movie. There was seriously not a single shot in this entire film that pulled me out. You could literally pause the movie at almost any point and be looking at an amazing still frame. And that's in large part due to the way that they decided to portray Gotham City in this movie. Previous iterations of Gotham always looked amazing, but they also always looked like Chicago or New York to me, where this feels like it's a place that we've never been to before, but that could absolutely exist. It was covered in shadows and dirt everywhere, and it was dangerous. Even the amount of rain that there was made it feel dangerous. It was raining constantly, and I just kept waiting for Batman to slip off of his motorcycle. Every inch and nook and cranny of this city felt dangerous. And what was amazing is that most things here were done practically whenever possible. But even when it wasn't possible to do it practically in camera, you wouldn't even know, because they skillfully used CGI to create the illusion that everything was practical. To shoot some of these larger-than-life Gotham City scenes, they used the volume, which, if you don't know already, are these massive stages with screens all around from head to toe, where they project the shots in the background so that the light coming from those panels is actually hitting the actors. You don't have to kind of guess like you do with a green screen when nothing is actually there. The actors can play off of them. The cinematographer can see in camera what it's going to look like right there. This is the same tech that they've used in shows like The Mandalorian, and this is the way it's going to be done for years and years to come. This is kind of the cutting edge, most recent film technology that is kind of being adopted across the board now because it's just that amazing. I mean, think about a shot at sunset for just a moment. Previously, when you were on set or on location trying to shoot something like this, you would have a good 15 to 20 minutes, maybe 30 minutes maximum to be able to get this shot. It's called chasing daylight. You're having to rush everything and plan everything out just so that you can cram it all into that short amount of time, that short window when you have the sun right where you want it for that sunset shot. You don't have to do that anymore. You can shoot a scene at sunset for an entire day, and that's what they were able to do here. It's why anytime you see daylight, it's usually at sunset or maybe even dawn, and it just looks incredible. And characters in Batman movies have always talked to Bruce Wayne about, why are you trying to save the city? You should just give up. There's no reason to save the city. And while I was able to suspend my disbelief in previous iterations and be like, yeah, I guess I can kind of see that, but honestly, the city's pretty nice and there's a lot of good people, I actually sided with them in this version of Gotham City because this place was a dump. Nobody would want to live there. Everyone who was in the city was kind of a piece of trash. And for a moment there, I was like, yeah, Bruce, what are you doing, man? This is a lost cause. That's how good it looked. The city is just beat down and grungy and broken, just like Bruce is. And so if he gives up on the city, he's subconsciously giving up on himself. And that's just not something he can bring himself to do. There was some amazing cinematography in this film. Incredibly tight close-ups that felt like you were in the character's emotions, in the character's head. The chase sequence, again, another extremely practical sequence, almost all done in camera, was just gorgeous with all these shots on car mounts and interesting angles that you don't usually see. Just so much amazing cinematography here that I'm really excited to break it all down here in another video once the movie actually comes out on Blu-ray. So make sure that you subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss that video when it drops. Now, I am a massive movie score fan. I listen to them when I'm writing or editing or working out, and I'm usually a really big fan of Michael Giacchino. I just can't get enough of most of his work. In my opinion, he's kind of the heir apparent to John Williams. But some parts of this score they didn't hit for me. Now, I'm not saying that this score was bad by any means. It also just didn't stand out to me as anything super unique or special. Now, Hans Zimmer, in his scores for both the Christopher Nolan and the Zack Snyder versions of this character, felt more unique and iconic to me. Now, back to the word commitment. They doubled down on the dark, grungy elements of this story here, but the music was the one spot where I just didn't feel like it knew exactly what it wanted to be. Some parts were genuinely scary and heavy, while others were almost lighthearted. There's this scene near the end of the movie where Catwoman and Batman kind of ride off almost in the sunset together, but they part ways. As they're riding their motorcycles through this dark cemetery, the music is very almost inspirational, for lack of a better word. Something about it just didn't fit. And there were a few parts of the movie where the music like that just didn't fit. I don't know. That's a nitpick for me. It definitely didn't ruin the movie for me at all. Hopefully you loved the soundtrack, but if not, let me know what you thought and why. However, when it comes to music, what I will say is the use of Nirvana was pretty great. And I'm not a Nirvana fan at all, but this song it worked for me. This song felt like the anthem for this version of Batman. Now, I saw some people complaining about the runtime. This is almost a 3-hour movie. It's absolutely the longest solo Batman film to date. But I never get the complaint about runtime because you know how long the movie is when you buy the ticket or when you press play on the streaming service. So you shouldn't be surprised at the runtime after you've seen the movie. Now, pacing, that's a complaint I can get. This movie was a 3-hour movie. To me, it felt like an hour and a half, 2 hours because the pacing was spot on. I was on the edge of my seat the entire time. I actually loved this version of this Batman universe so much that I was absolutely bummed when the credits started to roll because I just want more of it. At the end of the day, this is a superhero movie, but it doesn't feel like it. In 90% of superhero movies, the stories are about good and evil, very black and white. The Batman tends to dabble in the gray, that realistic area where not everything is so cut and dry. Good people make bad choices and bad people can create something good. It really is a well thought out detective story where we get to see Detective Gordon's Watson to Batman's Sherlock team up to piece together the intricate clues left by the Riddler. And I really liked this Riddler. This Riddler was a very modern take on the character that I appreciated. I thought it was clever that he came from a similar background as Bruce and being an orphan. In a lot of ways, they're almost mirrors of each other where they both have this goal of vengeance because of their past. And that added a lot of depth to the Riddler that I don't think we've seen on screen before. Now, don't get me wrong, this movie does absolutely have flaws. And this movie is absolutely not going to work for everything. In fact, I think this movie will turn some people off from future installments because it is so committed to the dark tone. This Batman is not necessarily as, fun as some other superhero movies or even other Batman movies for that matter. And while I wouldn't say that this is the best Batman movie ever made, I personally think that still belongs to The Dark Knight. However, I do think that this might be my favorite Batman movie of all time. That's weird to say because I have loved so many previous Batman iterations. But yeah, I'm just gonna say it. This is my Batman. This is the Batman movie I've always wanted to see. And I am so on board and excited to see where Matt Reeves and Robert Pattinson take the next story as the films continue on. This movie has some super cool potential setups for sequels with the introduction near the end of a potential inclusion of the Joker. And it's also been announced that there are currently 2 HBO series set in this universe currently in production. One with Colin Farrell as the Penguin again, and another one exploring Arkham Asylum. 2 things that were both set up kind of at the end of this movie. So whether you liked it or not, this new take on the Batman universe is here to stay. Now, would I recommend this movie? I would say yes, absolutely 100% if you are a fan of Batman through and through. But if you're just a casual movie-going fan and you're looking for a really fun, almost uplifting time, this is not the movie for you. But I am super glad that we have this version of Batman, that we have this movie, because it does show studios that there's a demand for a variety of different films, different lengths, different takes and visions on the same character. They can all coexist. It gets really, really boring when we see the same types of movies over and over and over again. Again, was this movie perfect? No. Did I have a blast? Absolutely. But let me know what you think. Did you love it? Did you hate it? Is this Batman your Batman? Let's start some conversation in the comment section below. And if you could, do the thing, hit all the buttons, help the channel out. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you around.